Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday. Yay, Friday, May 27th, 2016. And this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everybody. We made it. It is 80 degrees. Yeah, 80 at 10 a.m. And beautifully sunny here in upstate New York. We had a whole bunch of wicked thunderstorms push through yesterday. And all my new little fledgling vegetables were just cheering in the rain. I went out there this morning and they are perking everywhere, so that makes me very happy. So where do we leave off on a Wednesday? We did not do a show yesterday. Too many technical difficulties. We titled the show Technology Invading Biology, Cellular Manipulation and Control. And yeah, that pretty much puts an exclamation point to everything we've been talking about for the last few weeks. We've looked at probiotics and the connection between gut bacteria and your mental state, your health, your digestion, holes in your brain. I don't know. We found all kinds of crazy things. Shape-shifting vaccines in development by not only DARPA, but IBM's getting in the game as well. Google, I'm sure, is doing something. I don't remember what they were doing. Bill Melinda Gates into that Synlogics was the name of the company. I'm stretching my brain, guys, trying to remember 2 weeks worth of research. Synlogics with that synthetic biotic company because, you know, synthetic biotics, we can't go just taking good gut bacteria. I'm trying to remember the names. Bifido. I don't know. It's early. I've had literally one sip of coffee. You know what I'm talking about. All that good gut bacteria. I'll remember. Let the brain warm up a little bit. But, you know, we don't have to do the good gut bacteria because Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invested in that MIT group that is going to create synthetic biotics that can be programmed just like a computer to be able to seek and destroy inflammation and the causes of inflammation in the human body. So again, tech billionaires working on longevity projects, little nano doctor medicine type stuff. We actually just saw something a few days back in regards to the Weiss Institute as well, and I think that actually might have been on Wednesday, where they were programming molecular robots. And it's frightening because literally they could be programming these molecular robots and putting them into any of these new vaccinations, which aren't even vaccinations anymore. They are living synthetic organisms that they want to put into you to be able to work as a sentry system. I mean, we've talked about this lots and lots of times since I've been doing this show. They've been warning. DARPA has been warning. And not only were they creating this little sentry system, and I'm talking sentry with an S, like a guard that patrols the perimeter. They're working on that for the Internet of Things also. And that was one of DARPA Dan's things. If you remember, they wanted to get a self-healing, self-defending, self-mutating, morphing, so you don't have to have patches or updates anymore. Antiviral, anti-hacker, anti-vulnerability software for the Internet of Things. Because remember, the Internet has always been insecure, and it has been. You know, the patches for security have just been that Band-Aids, but it was never made to be secure from day one. Of course, problem, reaction, solution. So it was never meant to be secure from day one. Well, let's create a new internet. And that's what they're working on right now. One that includes you and me and every cell in our bodies. But wait, what? Oh, these vaccines aren't working. No, little Johnny gave everybody measles. Look, we have all these outbreaks everywhere, and we can't produce vaccines fast enough. Now, we went way back into the history of Project BioShield and experimental vaccines becoming part of the national stockpile as part of that George Bush program. We looked at DARPA's Blue Angel program for the universal flu vaccine, and that was back in 2006 is when I learned about it. I dug into it quite a bit since we talked about it on Wednesday again. And 2005 looks like when they introduced that program, so it was just rolling out when they were teaching us about that. But then, now we have this Intercept program using these tips that can overwhelm the immune system and cause the immune system to search and destroy. And we also have that, I don't know if they gave that one a name. I'm trying to think, I don't think they gave this one a name. The brand new one that they just took proposals on as of April 28th, so it was a month ago tomorrow. That's that shape-shifting. Shape-shifting. Co-evolving antivirals aim to keep ahead of fast-changing viruses. That is the name of the DARPA article on that. And, here's the thing. Now, let's tie this all back and bring 2 weeks full circle, because I started to have little dots connecting. So we have all this stuff going on, and God forbid, evolution hasn't been doing a good enough job, so we had to award some scientist, I think we mentioned her the other day, $1 million reward for rewriting DNA to be able to mimic evolution. So you make things evolve and force them and do it a lot quicker than it would have ever done naturally, because, nature doesn't know any better. We know better than nature. We can make freaks of nature, crisscross applesauce between anything and anything else, using CRISPR technology, and let's re-engineer some killer strains of bird flu or what? Oh, the 1918 pandemic. And then let's publish those results. And then let's come out and say, holy crap, we're about ready to reach the end of our ability to protect against such superbugs. I find interesting that we had a bunch of studies come out, one after the other, about antibiotics. Antibiotics, oh no, responsible for killing gut bacteria. Trichosan in your soap, responsible for killing gut bacteria. What? Oh, antibiotics. Glyphosate has lots of antibiotic properties, and it's causing this cascade of diseases in your body. That was all last week. We looked at that. I think we established quite a strong connection. Read lots of research on that. But then, a few days ago, a story comes out about antibiotics not only causing the memory portion of your brain to not be able to produce new cells, right? Remember that? Antibiotics prevent the brain from producing new cells, but it also causes immune system damage, which we would note through the gut and the bacteria being killed. So antibiotics, after they've been prescribing them all these years, but whoa, we read something the other day that stated that without antibiotics, we would still be in the Middle Ages. So antibiotics, and they really kind of did. You didn't die from getting a raspberry thorn in your finger anymore. You get a little infection, pop you some fungus or whatever the hell it is, mold, special ones, and be all cured. But now, it's just amazing how we had Obama announce last July that there was this new federal antibiotic resistant superbug directive that he inked. And we got to start reducing the use of antibiotics. But now it's coming out that the use of antibiotics supposedly has been responsible for a lot of the damage that's being done to our ecosystem, personally, physically. But here's the thing, and we discussed this back last week. It isn't necessarily... It could be a little bit, but it isn't necessarily the antibiotics you were taking. It's the wanton use of antibiotic substances in the environment that then you ingest. So you get them all secondhand, mostly through your meat. They inject the crap out of animals with the antibiotics wantonly, and then it goes into the meat supply, and you eat it on a daily basis if you're not getting organic, farm raised, whatever. We also discovered the glyphosate that gets sprayed on probably 80 or 90% of all the fruits and vegetables. I don't know. It's one of the world's most used pesticide. It's in breast milk, and it rains from the sky. It's everywhere. That, according to Dr. Huber, is massive antibiotic properties. So that's messing with us as well. Now we find out it causes brain damage. We also find out, this was a news story that just came out the other day, they now think that an antimicrobial mechanism that's gone rogue may play a role in Alzheimer's disease. So wait, are we going to find out maybe glyphosate's been eating holes in our brain and giving us dementia since we've had this epidemic along with everything else? I don't know. All I know is that they are talking now that it's some sort of immune system issue gone awry, like an autoimmune disease or something of that nature, that could be causing Alzheimer's. Yet we find out that there's all this stuff in our environment that is antibiotic properties that creates this whole massive cascade, including your brain not producing new blood cells or brain cells. It's just unbelievable. So so now we've laid the groundwork. So, story comes out yesterday. Pennsylvania woman is first U.S. citizen to have infection completely resistant to antibiotics. Oh, and it's all because of you. You've overused them, people. You took them when you didn't need them. And that's not blame the big corporations for making them so prevalent in the environment that they maybe don't work anymore. But you know what? Don't worry about that because we can't use antibiotics anymore. Shh. Antibiotics are causing Alzheimer's, they found out. Oh no, we got to switch to something else fast. And so we see this now all of a sudden. The superbug hit the U.S. shores. Obama had already declared, this federal initiative to combat superbugs last July. So the money is probably flowing out there. We got DARPA working on a synthetic immune system. So you won't have to worry about antibiotics in the future. Antibiotics. You know what? Just get this injection. We read that New York Times story, right? Synthetic DNA that goes into the recipient's DNA and incorporates itself permanently to make a synthetic immune system. And then it can shapeshift depending on anything that you'd be exposed to. And it'll come up with new defenses against it, like a superpower. This is sick, guys. I mean, am I hallucinating, or are they just lining up all these dominoes? So now they're demonizing antibiotics, making it dangerous even to take antibiotics. Because, oh my God, it'll cause brain wasting disease. But don't worry about it, because not only is DARPA, and I don't remember if it was Harvard or MIT, but remember Harvard. Oh, it was the Weiss Institute. Harvard had already, back a week ago, had that meeting with 150 scientists talking about the ethics of creating the synthetic human genome, meaning making a human from scratch without any parents ever, without any biological DNA, because they would synthesize it. They would recreate it all and make it synthetic. And then rewrite DNA strands to make themselves human. This is horrifying, people. So, of course, you know what happens here. Let me see if I can find it. We're going to try and connect to Skype. I'll get this all set up because It's Friday. We might as well try. And yesterday was a total bust, so got to make up for that. All right, look at that. It connected. I just got to turn up my volume. So in the middle of all this, hopefully there we go. Echo. Echo means it's working. So in the middle of all this, right, they're trying to put fear in the hearts of everyone because, again, they were trying to get like 1.1, originally 1.9, but now $1.1 billion for Zika funding. They had the head of the CDC, Friedman, something like that, like just about in tears yesterday on TV, begging. This is never my career, he says, if I ever seen anything like this, infecting 50 years, infecting fetuses in the womb. And for this disease we thought was just so mild. Oh my God, look at how horrible it is. I mean, honestly, guys, when I tell you that I have fears, I really have fears. And I have for a long time, since I read The Stand in the late 70s, a long time. But they're becoming realized. And I'm warning you right now, and I don't really know what we can do about this. But I think they're setting it up. They're going to want us all to become human 2.0 as part of the big experiment. And most people aren't going to want to. And so if there is a huge, quote-unquote, pandemic that no drugs, there's no, we can't make vaccines fast enough. Nope. We're making them in tobacco now, though, so we're trying universal flu vaccine. Oh, what? It's not the flu. Here, let's take this new shape-shifting one we're working on now called the Intercept program. But there's not going to be anything traditional that will save you from whatever plague they're getting ready to let go. Or maybe it'll just be lots of mini plagues. Lots of free experiments out there for Big Pharma to chow off of. But what's going to happen is it's going to be something horrible. I told you they've trained every single community in the United States as part of that FEMA training back in 2006 to respond to pandemics and to give prophylaxis to your entire town, whether it be a pill or a shot. So it's already, and I was trying to find, there's UN now, standard operating procedures out there I saw for the World Health Organization and how to respond to a quote-unquote pandemic. But, we already, there was some whistleblowers that came out a few shows back. I actually tagged that in the notes, where they had fully proven that last quote-unquote pandemic, that bird flu, cow, dog, pig flu that came out, and they're like never before seen again, that they were all mixed in a petri dish, where there were some doctors or World Health Organization members that had come out and said that whole thing was totally orchestrated. There was pressure by the pharmaceutical companies put onto the World Health Organization to declare pandemic to what? Oh, sell vaccines, okay? So, guys, I think in the end, there isn't going to be any pushback anymore. There isn't going to be any resistant consumer. You aren't going to be human 1.0 anymore that they can't control. Remember, we found out that there was that tight connection between the gut bacteria and emotion, the brain, being able to manipulate and control you. So the fact that Bill and Melinda Gates are in there making synthetic biotics, and they're in there tinkering with antibiotics and synthetic immune systems that have a direct connection, again, to your immune system, to your gut and your brain. I see danger, Will Robinson. So, all right, we're connected here. Let me turn it up. Because in the middle... I'm never done talking. In the middle of all this, who do we always have to roll out to make sure we give it a good kickoff? This is when you know it's an official bullshit propaganda story. Here we go.
There's now a confirmed case of a superbug that no antibiotic can apparently combat. A Pennsylvania woman has developed an infection that officials call, quote, a nightmare bacteria. CDC Director Dr. Tom Frieden sounded the alarm today, saying that this antibiotic-resistant strain could be, quote, the end of the road for antibiotics. Let's bring in CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, do we...
Roll Gupta.
Know how this woman became infected, and what do we know about this so-called nightmare bacteria?
Well, we don't know how this woman became infected. What we do know is that she went to a clinic. She was not in the hospital when this bacteria was found. We also know that she hadn't been traveling overseas, so this isn't something that could have been brought back from another country, for example. So typically what happens is when there's a lot of antibiotic use in a community, bacteria become resistant. This particular bacteria, something known as E. coli, something we've talked about a lot, does have a lot of different classes of antibiotics to try and treat it, at least 7 different types of.
And let's stop for a second. Because this is antibiotic resistant E. coli bacteria. Now, where did we just see that they were messing around with E. coli? Oh, with the DIY CRISPR kits. Yes. I believe they're using modified E. coli to do the zip. I mean, that's what CRISPR's made out of. This is just, I'm telling you guys, this just smells like a big steaming pile sitting in the sun for a week or so, going sour to me, just leaving a very, very bad taste in my mouth.
Antibiotics, not just antibiotics, but entire classes of antibiotics. And this particular bacteria didn't respond to any of those. And that's the big concern. I will tell you, Jake, people have been anticipating something like this happening for some time. And we don't know that for her, it's her immune system may still fight off this bacteria. But I think it's a little bit of a indication of what might be to come, more of these types of bacteria.
And what does it take to theoretically develop a new antibiotic that might be able to fight this new strain?
Well, there's sort of 3 ways to look at this. One is that are there existing classes of antibiotics that you bolster up, that you make more powerful? The class of antibiotics works, it's just not strong enough. The second thing is that is there something that's an entirely new class of antibiotic, a new synthesized class of antibiotic? You look at this bacteria, figure out how to synthesize an antibiotic to try and treat it. And then finally, looking to nature. I mean, there's been a lot of expeditions to various parts of the world, within rainforests, within the depths of the ocean, to see if you can find material that could be sort of the boilerplate or the genesis of an entirely new antibiotic. And that's ongoing. I mean, there may be things that are sort of in the pipeline, but not quite ready yet. And certainly, that's the hope, Jake.
And the thing is, we found a while back that they were already utilizing artificial intelligence to run through all of the on-label drugs that are out there and find off-label uses for them, which, I'm sure that there probably are things. And what I don't get either is why they're not looking at things such as silver. I read long ago that they were using silver in hospitals to combat MRSA. You also have local honey, your raw honey. I mean, they were using that in Australia. Put that on some big nasty, and it'll just dry right up and go away. Apple cider vinegar is also a good antibacterial that doesn't do bodily damage. So I'm not getting where this whole freak out happens. I mean, I guess if they genetically modified the bacteria in the lab, so it's killer flu, and it's all happening with climate change, wink, right? That it would be dangerous. But guys, I really think that this is some sort of build-up, fear, be afraid of touching anything now, and we'll have a cure for you, step right up. So he says, yeah, we're going to have to do some investigation, we're going to have to go into nature, because there might be stuff out there. We'll have to make sure that we can stay healthy into our old age. So here we go. I've had this one queued up for probably about a month, or at least. We're going to play this right now.
Eternal youth, mankind's impossible dream through the ages.
I don't want to hear
But just maybe.
Here we go.
A Russian scientist thinks that just maybe the secret of external life may have actually been found. Well, deep in the permafrost of Siberia, a living bacteria was discovered that is old, actually very old indeed. Anatoly Boshkov says that there's something about its DNA and the genes as well that gives this cell extreme longevity and protects it from damage as well.
It's trapped inside of the ice. We found a living thing. We can bring it back to life. If we can find the mechanism how that bacteria stays alive, then we probably would be able to find a tool to prolong our own life.
Eternal life. So tests have already begun on human blood cells, plant crops as well, and even mice right now. So scientists can't say exactly how the bacteria works, but they do insist that the impact is obvious. Well, mice, they live longer, and even when they do get old, they're still having plenty of babies. Brochkov, who discovered the bacteria, decided to become the first human guinea pig himself, and he's actually already injected himself.
I started to work longer. I never had a flu for the last 2 years, so it still needs the experiments. You see, we have to find first the mechanism how that bacteria prevents aging. So I think that is the way how the science should develop. What keeps that bacteria alive? What is that mechanism preventing the aging damages? And how can we use it for our own benefits?
Eternal youth, mankind's impossible dream through.
Oops, I was muted. Hold on, let's disconnect here. Yeah, so, anything goes. Let's look at the environment. Let's find bacteria. Let's go to Lake Vostok in Antarctica and find 12,000-year-old bacteria and bring it back and see what happens. I mean, they're doing stuff like that. So this scientist, in the name of living longer and being healthy, injected himself with 3.5 million-year-old immortality bacteria they found up in Siberia. Hey, guys, we had that other CEO of that gene company. I don't remember the name of it. That was, I don't know, probably a week or two ago. Her first name was Elizabeth, who she decided to become the first guinea pig as well for gene therapy. And that's now how they're selling these new shape-shifting immune systems. It's all in the name of gene therapy. It's going to keep you healthy. It's going to make us defective humans more godlike, I guess, because they all want to live forever. So, all right. Now I'm trying to tie like 2 weeks of stuff together. So let's fast forward now to what we ended up with on Wednesday. Started talking about being genetically modified, genetic modification in food, genetically modifying people now with this new DNA vaccine they want to roll out that the New York Times talked about, the shape-shifting synthetic immune system. They're talking about creating a synthetic genome for humans. They're CRISPR editing embryos in multiple countries now. We have the Department of Energy writing synthetic biology reports and presenting them to Congress. I remember what we read about on Wednesday involving the Department of Energy as well. There's a bunch of things. Remember the Department of Energy was also where they said they wanted to make the central point for doing some sort of brain monitoring center a few months ago. It's very odd. We also discovered, though, that they've been modifying foods and putting them into our food supply for at least 25, 30 years. They're building molecular machines, and they have been for 20 plus years, at least messing around with them in the universities. And they've been modifying food to utilize as vaccines. So when we tie in that Blue Angel program using tobacco to express antibodies, that was all a part of this original program with Dr. Arnsten that we talked about Wednesday with his banana vaccine. It was all about trying to help the poor children in third world nations, just like Bill and Melinda Gates did with the malaria goat. E. coli, of course, was one of them. Cholera, rotavirus that killed lots and lots of people. It entered the body through the gastrointestinal tract. And so to make edible vaccines, they seem to think made a lot of sense. Crossing that blood barrier in the gut is one of the primary locations. So developing an edible vaccine, so this is where we left off on Wednesday. The trick with an edible vaccine is convincing a plant to express the genes of a foreign organism. Well, again, Blue Angel program using the tobacco to start making these universal vaccines. They used it for the Ebola. They were using it for the universal flu. Now it's like this big new technology. They don't need to use eggs anymore, and they can make millions of doses in a very short period of time using tobacco. Genetically modified tobacco, mind you, and virus-like particles, which are synthetic viruses that they can load with their secret payload to Trojan horse it into your body. Fortunately, Arnsten's prior work prepared him to face this challenge of edible vaccines. As a biochemist, his career focused on unraveling the means by which photosynthetic membranes in the plant capture solar energy. And what we've tried to do for the last 10 years is to try to challenge the cellular machinery of a plant by adding a new gene, cause that gene to make new proteins, and then coax those new proteins into folding to the desired shape so that it accumulates. Now, when I read that, I was like, ding, 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 wait, malformed proteins, and they're modifying cells to produce these proteins that then they're going to fold specially. Well, that's exactly what prions are. Prions that cause like mad cow disease, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, CJD and CVJD in humans, chronic wasting disease in deer, as well as many others. Those are all formed by malformed proteins. We find out that they've been messing around with those for a long time. And as a matter of fact, a story just came out yesterday on Medical Express titled, "Study Reveals Protein That Dials the Immune System Responses Up and Down." Now, the banana vaccine story was from 2005. We are now talking 11 years later, and hey, look, study coming out that they can use proteins to dial the immune response up and down while he was working with folding special proteins back in 2005. Probably even before that, actually, because this was the 1990s when he started working on his edible vaccines. 1990s, right about when we started seeing mad cow, too. All right. This is Arnsten talking, the banana vaccine guy. "I took the knowledge about plant proteins under normal circumstances and used that for something new. That something new was vaccine development. And when Arnsten started investigating the vaccine issue in the early 1990s, that's right about the time that we started seeing nanotech. And it's also right about the time we started seeing this secret slipping of GMO food into the food supply. Flavor Saver tomato. Started investigating vaccine issues in the early 1990s. Scientists were already using genetically engineered yeasts to produce proteins for injection vaccines. Now, did you know that? In the 90s, they were using GMO yeast to produce proteins that were going into vaccines. And what's interesting about the fact that that's what they were doing is that is called like that desktop manufacturing. That is that way that they are now currently using, again, all these years later from the early 90s. And I think they've been doing it for a long time and just not saying anything, where they're not literally genetically modifying the food. What they're doing is they're genetically modifying a bacteria or a virus, mostly bacteria, flipping those little switches inside its cellular machinery so they can make it produce stuff for them. So I saw that there was another one, some bacteria that they've been able to flip switches and get it to produce opiates too. Synthetic opiates, but not as synthetic as creating them in a petri dish, because what they did was they modified the bacteria to produce the opiate. They're doing that also with the Department of Energy, right where the synthetic biology report came from to Congress, where they're taking these bacteria and, I don't know, modifying them to go produce ethanol or modifying them to go produce whatever, a new antibiotic. They're using that now in food, and we're going to take a look at some of that. There's the new CRISPR mushroom, and that's exactly what they do. They're circumventing directly genetically modifying the plant and doing it through some other outside organism that then gets into the plant and makes the modification. So they don't need to label anything under any rules anywhere or tell you anything at all. It's possible to use a higher plant instead of a lower plant, i.e. meaning instead of E. coli, let's use something bigger. Something that we already know is an agricultural crop. Can we take a potato or a tomato and turn it into a green factory? And we've found not only have they just recently, again, put on the market genetically modified potatoes, we know they already have genetically modified tomatoes. They have genetically modified apples now, too. But we covered, back when we did edible vaccines, there were potato vaccines also. So how long has that stuff been in our food supply? He's been working on this since the 90s. Indeed, with modern technology, it enables Arnsten to insert specific genes from foreign organisms into the genome of a green plant. Progeny plants will then produce the foreign protein. And if foreign proteins happen to be an immunity-inducing pathogen protein, then an edible vaccine is in the making. Now, what happens if they've been feeding us this stuff for 20 years, at least? Let's just hypothetical. Not only are they genetically modified, but now we're finding out that they could have been genetically modified and modified to produce these special proteins that make them somewhat edible vaccines. But these proteins might have gone rogue. Whoops. What if these proteins are what's responsible? They were saying that they think that Alzheimer's has an immune system going awry component. Well, if you were messing around with making edible vaccines and food that then mess with your immune system back 20 years ago, and now we have this epidemic of Alzheimer's, seems to be a malfunction out of the blue of your immune system. I don't know. Dotted lines. I'm postulating, people, but it's so ugly to me. That's why I've had this show sitting here. It's probably been about a month now with all these links, and I keep rebuilding them because this really, I think, requires some investigation. Who are these people? And how long has this really been going on? I mean, we've known about this for quite a while, but I mean, we're going back to 1983, and we're going to read about this right now, where the feds approved release of the first GMO bacteria. 83. All right, anyway. So back to the story. So if the foreign protein happens to be an immunity-inducing pathogen protein, an edible vaccine is in the making. Yet the challenges of science are not the only obstacles that Arnsten faces. This type of project requires a multidisciplinary approach, basic skills of clinical scientists, and as well as experts in product regulation and distribution. No biochemist can make progress in moving something forward on his own. It takes lots of linkages. He needs people in vaccine development and all kinds of scientists. And you know what's great is that this story was from 2005. This is right when that Project BioShield was in full swing. So, you know, I can guarantee you that he got sprinkled dollars from somebody to work on all this, because bang, look, DARPA comes out working with big tobacco and universities. Now we got genetically modified tobacco, i.e. higher plants, pumping out antibodies. And not only do we have tobacco pumping out antibodies, but now this is what's morphing into this universal synthetic immune system. They're going to be producing them the same way. In fact, satisfying regulatory policies has been one of the most painstaking elements of Arnsten's work. Again, that pesky Food and Drug Administration is going to get in the way by even feigning to pretend that they're protecting us from danger. We got to get rid of them, though. 21st Century Cures Act, and use it on the desperate and the dying, right? And then write a case study, and we'll prove that it's safe, Johnny. Don't worry about it. Just get in line. Hold your place. The pandemic is coming. There'll be a lot of people screaming, clamoring for this vaccine. I said this the other day. When they see friends and family bleeding out of orifices, they didn't do it yet, but they used Ebola as kind of like the graphic psychological horror to getting you into the mindset that vaccines, we need vaccines. They're keeping us safe, everybody. We don't want to be bleeding from everywhere. The newest one, of course, is Zika. We got Friedstein, or whatever his name is, the head of the CDC, crying on TV. He needs his money because we've reached the end of the line. And now we've reached the end of the line of antibiotics. They've just lined it all up, people. Those dominoes, I think someone just needs to sneeze. We don't even need a flick anymore. Arnsten is determined to demonstrate that his vaccine, this is the edible one, passes the rigorous requirements of the Food and Drug Administration, thereby silencing any critics who would accuse him of dumping experimental technology on the world's poor. Oh, God forbid, we don't want to accuse anyone of that. Bill Melinda Gates and Spider Goat. No, wait, Malaria Goat. Spider Goat didn't help the poor. That helped the military. Indeed, an interview with Arnsten reveals him to be passionate and articulate in explaining the rationale behind his work. His ideas involve sophisticated science and technology, but his motives are grounded in a genuine concern and a humanitarian interest. I'm going to tell you, the sad part of the matter is, I am certain it is. The man seems like he's a very nice man. He really does want to help people. But when you come up with a technology like this, it's very possible that it's going to be utilized for something more nefarious than what you planned. Look at the atom bomb. Einstein wished he never created that. Anyway, questions concerning genetically modified organisms. Not everyone agrees with Dr. Arnsten, though. In an interview with Nova and PBS in October of 2000, so let's rewind even more. Dr. Jane Rissler, a senior scientist with the Union of Concerned Scientists, expressed opinion that in the context of genetically modified foods, quote, it is a ploy to convince relatively well-to-do people in the industrialized world to approve this technology. It's playing on the guilt of relatively well-off people that somehow if they don't approve this technology by agreeing to buy these products, it'll result in people dying of starvation in developing worlds. And I can't even believe she said that in 2000, because that's exactly now what that new report by paid scientific shills, remember we read that one last week as well, saying that, we found nothing ever that caused any problems with not only humans and eating GMOs, but the environment. Nope. We found nothing. And looking at all the studies back to the 80s, we found nothing that proved to us. But what we did find was, it's not really economical, and it's not really helping farmers in these poor countries or farmers here. There's no real economic benefit to this. Interesting. That was already, 2000 is 2016. That was 16 years ago. She called him out. And 16 years later, after now the genies are all out of the bottle, we're talking Tempest by this point. There's no putting those back. It was a tactic to get it out there. Because once it's out there, what are you going to do about it? You can't get it back. Again, mentioning that seed vault, that's why that's there. Again, mentioning genome databases, well, that's why that's there too. They need to preserve before they screw it all up, because the genies are out. While directed at genetically modified foods in general, and not specifically edible vaccines, Dr. Rissler's comments do strike at the heart of the debate over genetically modified organisms. that has also stirred up controversy between the United States and Europe. And yeah, I mean, Europe has banned GMO, but here's something that I thought I saw a while back. I confirmed it the other day. They are still able to feed animals, though, genetically modified feed. So even though the animals themselves maybe aren't necessarily genetically modified like good old Dolly. Well, Dolly was a clone, but now they can clone and then genetically modify in China. Even though they don't have directly genetically modified food in the market, they do have animals in the marketplace that are being consumed that ate genetically modified crops. And if we go back to Dr. Huber and this whole talk about glyphosate and the mystery bacteria they were finding in the soil and the stillbirth abortions and reduction in birth rates and whatever in the animals that consume the GMO alfalfa and soy, it should be a concern to us that, even if in the countries where they're banned, you're still being exposed to these toxins. These toxins get into every cell. So you cannot tell me that we are not then ingesting this stuff and it is being incorporated into our cells, because I can guarantee you it is. Some scientists feel that GMOs are safe. Yeah, well, we found out a whole bunch of them that are paid well by the GMO companies tell us they are. And in a 2000 interview with PBS, Jeremy Rufkin, president of the Foundation on Economic Trends, recalls a time in 1983 when the U.S. government approved the release of the very first GMOs, a bacteria that prevents frost from forming on agricultural crops. Now, was this that Arctic flounder tomato? Because we read about that one too, where they took the genes out of that flounder that lives up in the Pacific by Alaska, the ones that make it not freeze in Arctic temperatures, and they spliced and diced them into a tomato so the tomatoes didn't freeze. Says all of our regulations have been set up in an era in which physics and chemistry ruled. But now it seems to me that we needed to have a thorough and thoughtful global understanding and discussion on the potential environmental implications of reseeding the earth with genetically modified organisms. And that has been my point all along. Nobody asked me, or you, or our children, or our grandchildren. Nobody allowed us to make the decision as to whether or not we wanted to be a part of this big experiment in the petri dish we call Earth. And we didn't. And now they're taking it a step further. They're working on co-evolving us into transhumanist freaks. I don't want to be a human 2.0. And neither does my kid. And we're going to be forced. I'm telling you, they're going to force us with this new shape-shifting, DNA-changing synthetic immune system. And all be in the name of keeping you safe. And they're going to use peer pressure. They're going to use you being a resistant consumer, one of those anti-vaxxer people. Notice how they've demonized them. And they've made Johnny's measles case like you were walking around with the bubonic plague. I mean, the measles is something that happened. Chickenpox is something that happened. The majority of people didn't die from them. It is not a pandemic. All right, well, let's continue a little tiny bit more. Critics of GMO technology argue that not enough testing has been done or is even possible, ding, 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 to ensure that genetically altered organisms will not have a negative environmental consequence, right? Or, you grow 3 arms 2 generations from now because of a defect. I just saw, smoking pot. I saw in a story yesterday. They now came out after now it's going to be legalized everywhere. Now they're like, oh, wait, a new study out of Australia where coincidentally they're pushing now to legalize medical MJ. But a new study out of Australia says smoking pot alters your DNA and makes you more susceptible to cancer. So, I mean, if just smoking something is altering your DNA, then what the hell do you think eating something that's been genetically modified does? Especially when it's sprayed with all kinds of pesticides and shit that go and kill all your beneficial bacteria. Leaky gut syndrome, again, it's that whole cascade. Guys, this is such an ugly picture. And they've been doing this since 1983. Arnsten recognizes that these concerns, which no long-term studies is one of them, and much of his time is spent working to first ensure that his work meets rigorous standards of integrity, and then to translate that information to the public. He says, to a large extent, I rely on the regulatory agencies to help in the education and acceptance. Accept. It's for your own good, Johnny. And I've been constantly alert to those issues, he says, because it's always something that can rise up. And in fact, Arnsten's protocol takes such concerns into consideration. And as a result, the genetically altered vaccine-producing plants are not grown freely, thereby minimizing the risk that such genes would be unintentionally incorporated into other species. Well, yeah, in 2005, that was the case. Who knows now in 2016 as they have entire factories growing GMO tobacco expressing antibodies for who the hell knows what. But don't think we got along or got away that easy. Let's hear who some of these people are involved in clinical trials. From an efficacy perspective, Arnsten's most recent clinical trial are particularly exciting. Human volunteers stepped right up and enrolled at a study in the University of Maryland at Baltimore that started to produce antibodies against the Norwalk virus, which causes bouts of diarrhea. And after eating Arnsten's creation, which in this case happened to be a genetically modified potato, in 2005. Beware, we have that new GMO potato that's on the market. And I don't even know if there is to be any label whatsoever. They say the modification is just that it doesn't get those little brown spots. Same with the apple. But they could do anything they want to it. So it could be producing some sort of antibody as well in every bite, for all you know. Negotiations were also in progress in 2005 to start clinical trials abroad with the International Vaccine Institute in Korea. And I'll guarantee you it's South Korea, because that's our whole little military arm extension. And they're going to begin these studies where, a new center that was funded in large part by who? Oh, Cupid. And I'll give you a guess, it's not DARPA. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yes. They're like everywhere. They are the plague. Clinical trials of cholera vaccines are also planned to take place there, as well as in where? Well, one of the places we just normalized relations with and told them we drop the embargo and start feeding them weapons, Vietnam, as well as Cambodia. That's where our UN envoy, what's her name? Angelina Jolie goes to Cambodia a lot. Regions where cholera is still a serious medical concern. And in addition, during a recent scientific conference held at the Flynn Foundation's Phoenix office, Arizona, they're doing a lot of work there too, tentative connections were made with company representatives from Egypt and India as well. And we know Bill and Melinda Gates is on the hook for that Gardasil vaccine again. Another vaccine that uses virus-like particles. All kinds of synthetic payloads. And there's a lawsuit where they damaged lots of young Indian girls without giving them proper informed consent as to what would happen in the clinical trials. These meetings, organized by the Arizona Biodesign Institute on behalf of the production of vaccines from Applied Crop Sciences, highlighted technical advances in plant-based vaccines. And Arntzen, keynote speaker at the meeting, said, "We intend to visit India and they are willing to fund clinical trials there, and we could send them vaccine materials, and they're interested in developing the product. Well, Vorat Pharmaceuticals is one of the very first on the Zika vaccine, the one that nobody investigated. Bill and Melinda Gates sprinkled money over there. I really think that India has been very strategic to them, not only for having a large population of people to experiment on, but also that's where they just put 2 billion people onto a universal ID cashless society program. India is where they built the programmer villages, and they have their army of programmers, all thanks to Bill and Melinda Gates, guys. All right, so for now, all such trials will involve genetically modified potatoes and tomatoes for edible vaccines. We also saw they were using rice. They can be freeze-dried and transported and put in your dinner tomorrow. All right, guys, everyone, make sure you have an awesome weekend. Stick around. There's all kinds of new radio. Ms. Lonnie Clark is also live up next. It is Friday, so Josh is live at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I don't have a bumper. I really thought I said it. Oh, I don't know. Maybe my time is off. All right, anyway. Yeah, it looks like it's off. My clock's off a minute. That's weird how that happens. We have, I lost my train of thought. Josh, live at 6. We have this week's replay of The Boys on Primer Time and 8, Truth on the Tracks with Brandon, his show from this week at 9. Alan Watts' show from this week at 10, and live the Anti-Media Radio with Levon at 11. Make sure you guys come back on Monday. I don't know, we're going to kick it off. I'm trying to get Clint Richardson. We'll see if we can get some of his take on this between the prions and the edible vaccines. I'm sure he's going to have something to say. All right, guys, have an awesome Friday, and I will catch up with you on Monday. Everybody take care.